They may see their deceased loved ones. They may have joyous reunions that people they knew on earth who died. And then ultimately, at the end of their experience, they often have to make a decision about returning to their earthly life or not.
Claim, 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 claim. I don't care. I don't care what they saw. I honestly don't. Forgive me if that sounds dismissive, but these are all just claims. I saw a bright light, I had to make a decision, I had a life review, yada, 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 yada. Sure, fantastic. And I'm God, by the way. I can do miracles. And I can see into your mind, and I know that you're lying to me. Yeah. We can all make claims. Talk is cheap. As Christopher Hitchens once put it, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed as such.
Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you that way. Thank you.
Hello everybody, Magic Skeptic here, aka Magic Dara, and you're all most welcome to another episode of A Magician's Thoughts. One of the most common criticisms I receive in the comment section and from people who are longtime supporters of mine is that I spend far too much time criticizing Christianity. Of course, there's a very simple reason for that. I was raised in a Christian environment, and so my negative experiences, to the extent that they were negative, vis-a-vis religion, are primarily Christian, right? I mean, it's very, very straightforward. I was raised in an arguably Christian nation surrounded by Christians, and so the malicious and insidious side of Christianity was something I was exposed to growing up, and naturally enough, I've dedicated a majority of my time, or the majority of my time, to critiquing that worldview. And so, yeah, were I born in Afghanistan, I probably would be spending, assuming I went on the same trajectory and I became an atheist, and assuming I wanted to risk my life in that part of the world, I would probably be spending the majority of my time criticizing Islam. Similarly, if I were born, I don't know, in India, I'd probably be criticizing Hinduism or what have you. That's a fairly straightforward point. But, you know, the criticism still stands. Perhaps I should spend more time criticizing other religions. So, one point on that, though, a lot of the criticisms that I've leveled at Christianity can actually be leveled at other faiths. When I'm criticizing the arguments for God's existence, it's not like the Christians in the world are the only ones who use those arguments. Granted, I couch those videos within a Christian framework, and I generally attack Christian speakers and critique Christian videos and so forth. But again, those exact same arguments are the ones that are deployed by Muslims. They're the same arguments that are deployed by other religious adherents and people who don't subscribe to any particular faith. There are people who just believe in a kind of ambiguous notion of God. And again, they would use the same arguments from design, logical arguments like the ontological argument, which I've addressed on the channel before, and so on. So yeah, my critique of Christianity can actually be focused on other faiths. I just wanted to put in a little defense for myself there. But again, I will admit that the critique and the kind of comment that people have made in the past, it does stand. I do spend the majority of my time criticizing Christianity. And so with that in mind, guys, I wanted to go down a different road in today's video, and I'm going to critique more of an Eastern religious idea, and that is the notion of reincarnation, which we find, albeit it's probably more accurately described as rebirth within the Buddhist tradition, but let's just go with the term reincarnation for now. This idea that once you die, you can come back and live other lives. Obviously, the theology there differs. Some believers in reincarnation believe that we can come back as different animals. Others believe that we just come back in different realms, and there are nuances there depending on which faith and which denomination within each faith you want to focus on. I don't want to get into all of that nitty-gritty today. I'm just going to focus on reincarnation in a more general way. So, you know, in response to those who have suggested I spend too much time criticizing Christianity, I'm going to spend today's video deconstructing and criticizing reincarnation. And needless to say, this is an idea that comes out of Eastern, or what you might call maybe even Indian religions, that being Buddhism and Hinduism and what have you. So, with all that said, we're just going to dive right in here. So, to aid me in my criticism and deconstruction and response to reincarnation claims, I have sourced a video for today's discussion, and this video comes from a channel called Hare Krishna TV. Of course, the Hare Krishnas are a branch of Hinduism, and so again, focusing more on those Eastern religions in today's video. And so the video is titled Reincarnation Evidence in Scientific Research. That is, reincarnation evidence in scientific research. I've already watched this video in advance, truth be told, and it is, to be fair, a very interesting video. That said, I do believe that it is utterly and just completely fallacious. The arguments and the ideas that are put forth in this video really don't pass any reasonable skepticism test. And so I'm going to share this video with you in the hopes that I can perhaps enlighten, if you'll forgive the pun, enlighten anyone in my audience who might actually be a believer or, might be leaning in the direction of various reincarnation ideas. One of the things that's really kind of disturbed me as an atheist is the research, and which I can pop on the screen right now, is the research which reveals that atheists aren't really fantastic skeptics, it would seem. A lot of people who lose their religion and become atheists, atheism being defined here as just not believing in gods, those very same people don't go on to just be paragons of skepticism and scientific insight. No, it seems that there's a lot of research that indicates that atheists, after losing their faith in whatever religion they had, just swap to another metaphysical nonsense. They swap to another supernatural woo. Atheists or, ex-Christians end up believing in tarot cards and angels and crystals and chakras and all that stuff. New Age nonsense, in my view. Forgive me for saying so. If you want me to elaborate on any of that stuff, jump into the comments below and perhaps I'll make a video on New Age ideologies. But for now, again, I just have to say that there are a lot of atheists out there who believe things without good justification, right? Again, supernatural nonsense. And reincarnation is one of those ideas, guys. Remember, you can be an atheist and believe in reincarnation. Atheist isn't a synonym for doesn't believe any supernatural nonsense. Atheist is quite a technical label that simply means that you do not believe in any gods. Technically speaking, Buddhists can be called atheists. Buddhism is not a religion that includes a God concept. Now, there are, you might argue, similarities, depending on which iteration of Buddhism you want to look at. There's the Buddha of infinite love in the Pure Land, something that, if you're not aware of, you can look into. You could argue that there are similarities there with the God concept, but still, not all Buddhists believe that, and even those that do wouldn't be tempted to call the Amitabha Buddha, the Buddha of infinite love, a god, right? So, again, you could reasonably call Buddhists atheists, and there would be no contradiction there. And so, yeah, atheists can believe in reincarnation. So I'm making this video, guys, not only to address the criticism that I focus on Christianity too much. That's a totally fair criticism, and making this video addresses that. I'm branching out and looking at other religious ideas and other faiths and other traditions. Fair enough. But I'm also making this video because I think it's actually an incredibly important video to make, because there are a lot of atheists out there who push back against me when I address other supernatural ideas. When Halloween came and went, however long ago that was now, I made a series of videos addressing various Halloween-themed supernatural claims, be it ghosts, possession, and all that kind of stuff. And you would be surprised, and the commenters who I'm referring to know who they are, the people who agree with me on the non-existence of God, and they bat their chest and talk about how silly Christians are for believing in heaven and hell, and believing that there's a God who can answer prayers and perform miracles, and Jesus came back from the dead and water into wine and all that stuff. Those very same people who laugh at Christians for believing all that supernatural nonsense are the same people who pushed back against me when I argued that ghosts probably aren't real, or when I argued that possession is a nonsense and that we can understand modern possession claims through a science of the brain and hallucination and what have you. In other words, it can be understood through the lens of illness or even just deception and deceit and so on and so forth. In other words, there are naturalistic explanations for these phenomena. But again, atheists, long-committed atheists who have been watching my channel from the start, who support me every single time I critique the Bible, those were the people pushing back against the claims I was making. And so I suspect that today we're going to have a very similar phenomenon. I expect some of you atheists out there, people who don't believe in a god, to push back against my reincarnation claims. And you know what? Please do. If I'm wrong on this and it turns out there's compelling evidence for reincarnation that I've missed, I want to know about it. If I'm wrong, I'm the first person who wants to know. But look, with all that said and acknowledged, let's jump in to today's video and let's explore the evidence, alleged evidence, for reincarnation and see if there's anything to it. Needless to say, and as I'm sure you can imagine, I'm not going to be converting into a believer in reincarnation today. Let's see if you'll agree and dive right in.
Let's consider the 4 areas of scientific studies which strongly point to reincarnation.
I think it's important to pause here just for a moment. I know that no evidence has been presented yet in the video, but just listen to the certitude. It points out that what you're about to hear is strong evidence for reincarnation. Just keep that in mind as you watch the rest of the video, because another criticism I receive is that perhaps I'm taking these videos too literally. People have jumped into the comments in the past and said, well, you know, Magic Skeptic, it's not like they were saying that this is, you know, absolutely certain, or it's not like they were saying that this is really, really strong evidence or anything. They're just pointing out some interesting evidence that might lean in the direction of this particular idea that they're championing. But that's not the case in this video. Again, I have to draw your attention to the certitude. This video claims that what we're about to hear and what we're about to be told serves as quote unquote strong evidence for reincarnation. So just keep that in mind as we go through the evidence that's about to be presented. And on that note, don't hold your breath, because what you're about to hear is very, very far from strong indeed.
Let us consider the first, hypnotically induced past life memories. When trained hypnotists help people to recollect their past going back to their childhood, infancy, and earlier, research has shown that more than 90% of all hypnotizable persons furnish memories that indicate previous lives.
I don't know where they got this 90% number from, but frankly, I don't care if the number was 100%. If 100% of so-called hypnotically induced persons remember past lives, that is not evidence that they actually have a past life. I mean, do I have to say the obvious here? The fact that somebody remembers something doesn't mean that that's a thing that happened. Is this not just totally transparently obvious? And yet this video says that it's going to provide strong evidence for reincarnation. Strong evidence. Person A says that they remember that they had a past life. Oh my God, it turns out it's true. Are you kidding me? Are you actually kidding me? Guys, this is just an assertion, right? Now, you might say, no, Magic Skeptic, it's not an assertion. Let's assume the study is true for a second and that 90% of people who are hypnotically induced do in fact remember past lives. No, I'm not denying that that has happened. Again, I'm happy to make the number 100%. If 100% of people who are hypnotically induced claim to remember past life memories, that would mean that they actually are. That's where the assertion comes in. The assertion is not the fact that these people are making these claims. I get that people make these claims. The assertion is that the claims themselves are evidence for reincarnation. Now, you could make a technical point here and say, well, it is evidence of a sort. It's, you know, eyewitness testimony or, you know, verbal evidence. Yeah, fair. If you want to score a technical victory and call it evidence because people said something happened, then sure. Well, then, in the exact same token, hey guys, Magic Skeptic here, I am God. Well, that's evidence by the exact same token. It's verbal evidence. I've told you something about myself. But is it good evidence? Should it change anybody's mind if I tell you that I'm God? I trust and I hope, dear listener, that you acknowledge that that is the worst form of evidence, especially when we're talking about sensationalist claims about past lives and gods and what have you. I mean, get real here. This is a joke. Again, I don't care if 100% of people who have been so-called hypnotically induced claim to remember past lives. Those claims are still just claims. All of the work to prove reincarnation still lies ahead of you. You now need to do the work, the scientific work, to verify whether or not those claims are true. You see, all we have here is an observation. The observation is this. People who are hypnotically induced claim, frequently it would seem, assuming this number is correct, that they remember past lives. That doesn't mean that they do. People claim things all the time that aren't necessarily true. And I'm not suggesting, by the way, that they're lying, although deception is undoubtedly a candidate explanation here. What percentage of that 90% do you think were just being disingenuous, lying, or trying to get attention? We can't dismiss that as a candidate explanation and possibility for at least some sample size of the 90%. But I won't be, pedantic and cynical and say that all 90% were lying. It doesn't even matter if none of them were lying. Somebody can be genuinely mistaken. I've often used the analogy where if my mother, who I trust more than anybody else on the planet, told me that she had breakfast this morning with Jesus Christ, I would believe her because I know she wouldn't lie to me. But yet I wouldn't believe the claim. I would believe that she was honestly relaying an experience that she had this morning, but I wouldn't for a second assume that the experience itself was pointing to a literally existing Christ who visited my family home. And so yes, these people who claim to have remembered past lives might very well be telling the truth, but that doesn't mean that their claims are accurate and true. It doesn't mean that their claims are scientifically true or accurate. Again, they might be telling the truth without having the truth. That might sound like a contradiction, but I think you guys understand where I'm coming from here. Okay? There's a huge difference. There's an enormous difference here. So, on point one, guys, I'm afraid I don't really care how many people have claimed that they remember past lives. Are you aware that people remember being the same person, right? There are hundreds of people at this point, perhaps even thousands, who claim that they were Henry VIII in a past life. Obviously, they can't all be right unless you're going to articulate some kind of nonsense notion that multiple people can dwell within the same body, which would just be nonsense on top of nonsense. Clearly, the vast majority of these people are either self-fooled or are just, bald-faced lying to us. Whatever the case may be, people simply saying that they remember past lives is not enough evidence to suggest that they actually have had past lives. But look, let's move on and let's give the video a chance. Maybe it has some more compelling evidence, more strong evidence to share. Let's have a look.
The past life is accessed through accessing the subconscious. And because subconscious has all the memories, perfect memory bank from the time we started our journey as a human being.
Assertion, assertion, assertion. This gentleman has just made a number of claims in a row, hasn't provided any evidence for any of these things. And of course, he is just assuming that all of this is powerful evidence for reincarnation, that our subconscious contains a backlog of the memories of previous lives. I mean, sorry, I'm not going to take that seriously. I'm just not going to take that seriously. I'm not saying that I know for sure that he's wrong, but I'm not in the position here of trying to claim something. Just to be clear, a point of order on this video, I'm not claiming that I can so-called debunk reincarnation. I'm not saying that I know for sure that reincarnation isn't true. I'm simply saying that there's not enough evidence to point out that it is true. And making assertions about the subconscious and what memories it contains just isn't going to cut the mustard, I'm afraid. To be fair, you can remain entirely agnostic and say, I don't know if reincarnation is true or not. And these people would still have all their work ahead of them. They are still in the position, because of the beliefs that they hold, they're still in the position, the burden of proof, they're still in the position where they have to prove that their claims are true. Whoever advances a claim must defend it. And to be clear, one more time, I'm not necessarily advancing the claim that reincarnation is false. I'm sitting on the fence and saying, okay, I'm not sure. Where's your evidence for reincarnation? And as you can see, dear listener, they're coming up short already. But let's look at the rest of the evidence.
Let's turn to the second, spontaneous past life memories among children.
I worked with several children. They all remembered their last life. It was amazing. And then when they go to school, they sort of get brainwashed and forget it.
This is the most depressing part of the video thus far, I have to admit. This is such a disingenuous framing of what's actually going on here. He says that these children, they remember their past lives, but then they get brainwashed by the education system. First of all, just get over yourself. I'm sick of this thing that happens in the world today where people want to vilify the education system. And I don't only say this because I myself am a teacher, but it's part of this kind of more recent phenomenon where we attack authorities, where we attack experts, and we try to destroy truth, basically. There are people who say we live in a post-truth world, and you know what? I'm starting to believe them. Nobody knows what to believe anymore because the people who actually know what they're talking about, the experts as it were, are being besmirched and attacked at every turn. And it is comments like these from this gentleman that are part of the problem. They get brainwashed in school. You mean they get educated? You mean they go to school and get educated and they stop believing in childish things? When you grow up, as Christopher Hitchens once put it, you must put your toys away, right? And children believe all sorts of nonsensical things, and we let them do that because they're children. But we understand that when you grow up, you have to set those childish things aside. That imaginary friend that you used to talk to when you played with your toys, you stop believing in that. Is this guy going to take that seriously? Does he believe that imaginary friends are real? Because children really do believe in their imaginary friends down to the finest detail. They'll tell you what colour their imaginary friends' eyes are and how tall they are and what their name is and their interests, etc. The evidence for imaginary friends is commensurate with the evidence for past life recall. I don't care if children have said in the past that they have memories of previous lives. I don't care if every child on the planet says that they have memories of past lives. To take that seriously would be to be engaged in a fallacy of consensus. If every single human on the planet had memories of past lives, it wouldn't mean that there were, in fact, past lives. Again, the fact that the majority of people believe something doesn't make it true. You must establish independent evidence for this thing that you're claiming. And again, we're talking about children here. Children are probably the least reliable source of information on any subject. On any subject. And this guy wants to use this as the fundamental basis for believing a rather extraordinary claim about reincarnation. Guys, this is silly beyond belief. Suffice to say, this is the furthest thing from strong evidence. Children telling us that they remember their past lives. Who cares? Who cares? Now, if you're a scientific researcher and that intrigues you and you want to explore that, have at it. But don't come back to me and tell me that reincarnation is true because children said so. That is just ridiculous. Absolutely and fundamentally ridiculous. Let me know how you get on with your imaginary friend study. And by the way, they'll also tell you they saw Santa Claus and the reindeer flying through the sky. Do you believe in Santa Claus now? I'm sorry, but shut up.
Only later, 20 or 30 years, should they experience some spontaneous memory or undergo hypnotic experience, do they remember. But my experience with children is up until they go to school, almost all of them had some glimmer and could tell me what they were, who they were, and what they did in their past life.
Could they tell you they actually remembered? You see, guys, this is the problem. The word remember here is actually an assertion. And I think it comes up many, many times in this video. They say that people remember things when they're hypnotically induced. Children remember things but they're brainwashed, and then later on they can have a spontaneous memory. The word memory is being deployed here rather frequently, and so I think it's worthy of pausing here just for a moment to focus on the use of this word. If you're saying that somebody remembers something, that assumes that the thing they're remembering actually happened. Because that's what memories are. Memories are thoughts in our heads that pertain to events that happened in the past. But something isn't technically a memory if it relates to something that didn't happen. It's a fiction. It's an invention. And while you might experience it consciously as a memory, I've had it happen 100 times or so in my life, many, many more times than that perhaps, where I remembered something erroneously and realized that it wasn't a memory after all. It was a fiction created by my own mind. I swear on my, goddaughter's life that I remember putting my keys on the table, but it turns out I left them on the rack. Or I swear that I put that jumper in the wash, but really it's in the hamper next to the washing machine. Or these are trivial examples, but we all have this in our lives where we remember things incorrectly. In which case, what we discover is our brain didn't actually remember something. It invented a fiction, or it took another memory and stuck it with a different scenario to create a new kind of almost augmented thought, which is erroneous because it's taken two historical events and put them together. If you search through your memory, dear listener, if you just think about your past for a moment, you'll realize that there are all sorts of instances in your life where this has happened, where you have a disagreement with somebody about what happened on a particular night or a particular day. Oh, wasn't that the day that we went to the cinema? No, that was another day. That was the day we went bowling. No, I swear, that was the day, because we were picked up by Johnny in his car and then we went straight to the cinema. Bowling was another time. And then eventually, if you work at it, you can figure out whose memory is actually correct, thereby revealing that one of those memories, or both of them to one extent or another, was actually flawed. That the memory that was produced by your brain is something of an invention rather than a past life recall, or not past life recall, but a past recall, right? So our brains are all the time, it would seem, and I'm not a neuroscientist of any description, I'm just, giving you the layman's version of this, but it's quite evident and intuitively obvious, to me at least, that our brains aren't like computers that, reach into the file vault and recall a memory and pull out a historical recording. That's not what's going on. Our brains are kind of like professional guessers. They invent things. Our brain is very, very good at filling in the gaps and the blanks with other information. In other words, our brain creates memories. It doesn't recall memories. And again, the evidence for that is in your everyday life where you remember things erroneously, or in this case, and just to speak definitionally for a moment, you're not actually technically remembering things. You're not recalling things. You're recreating things in real time. And those recreations can very often be flawed. And if I can't even remember where I left my fucking car keys, why are we going to trust a child who claims to remember a past life? Why would anybody in their right mind trust that at all? Now, perhaps I have a particularly bad memory, and I don't mind admitting that my memory isn't very good, to be honest. I have to write everything down. But even people with good memories would have to admit that they get things wrong when they remember, and that their brain can invent fictions that they swear are true until it's shown to be categorically false and mistaken. And so anyway, I just wanted to pause here for a moment to briefly clarify how this word remember is being deployed in a arguably, maybe unintentionally, disingenuous or inappropriate fashion. So just keep that in mind as we make our way through the rest of the video.
Let's move on to the third among the scientific evidences for reincarnation: near-death experiences, NDEs, and out-of-body experiences, OBEs. Near-death experiences, or NDEs, are experiences of extraordinary visions and perceptions during periods of unconsciousness among people who are medically dead or nearly dead due to causes like accidents, diseases, surgeries, or attempted suicides. These people returned from the dead or the near-dead to tell us their amazing experiences. NDEs and OBEs have been investigated by researchers from across the globe.
All of us people investigating near-death experiences see the same pattern of elements. Often one of the first things to happen right after that life-threatening event, often the first element of a near-death experience, is what's called an out-of-body experience. Consciousness separates from the body and goes over the body.
This is such a disingenuous, again, I want to attribute the principle of charity here. Perhaps it's unintentional, but whatever way you cut it here, this is such a disingenuous or inappropriate framing of what's actually going on here. He says that, it's the same in every case. The consciousness leaves the body and these people observe things that happen that they shouldn't be able to observe because they're clinically dead or nearly dead or what have you. This is just not what's going on, and this is not what the research says. This is the furthest from the truth. Again, they keep omitting a key word here, and that is the word claim. People claim during near-death experiences and so-called out-of-body experiences to have felt that they have left their body. They claim to have experienced visions of standing beside their body or to be standing or floating above their body looking down. But again, that's a claim. That hasn't been verified. It has never once in the history of the human species been verified that the consciousness can separate from the body. There is no evidence for that, or at least there is no good evidence for that. Right? Somebody claiming that they were floating above their body or that they felt that they left their body is just that. It's a claim. It's like the kid who claims that they've got an imaginary friend or that they remember a past life. These are just the words of a person. Now, again, this person might be telling the truth. These people who they've investigated might be telling the truth. They might be honestly relaying a feeling or an experience, just like I used the example of my mother earlier, who might be honestly relaying her experience as, yeah, it really felt like Jesus was in the room and I was talking to him. But that doesn't mean that that's what happened. It might be an honest relaying of what you feel happened or what you experienced, but that doesn't mean that that is, in fact, what happened. Let's look at the facts here for a moment. We're talking about a human being who is either clinically dead or nearly dead, or whose heart stops and whose brain is shutting down. Wouldn't you expect to see a sound and light show? Right? The electrical signals in your brain are going to do strange things. Your brain is going to do strange things when it's oxygen deprived. We know that we can reliably produce hallucinations and strange experiences when people are oxygen deprived. This is just a fact. This is a well understood fact about human biology. An oxygen-starved brain is a brain that is really fertile for strange psychological and mental experiences. So it's not surprising to me that on the operating table or during cardiac arrest or what have you, that when a person is dying or nearly dead, or in fact when their heart stops for a few minutes before being resuscitated or what have you, all of these things are incredibly traumatic experiences for the body. And when the brain is oxygen starved in those moments, it's not surprising to me at all that these people would have strange experiences, and when they're resuscitated and asked about what happened, they say it was really, really strange. I felt like I was outside my body and what have you. But just to be clear, not every person says that that's what happens. There is an incredibly important study on this that I want to share with you, which I'm going to get into right now. This is a study from 2014 titled Awareness During Resuscitation. This was actually the first serious large-scale investigation that looked into near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. And I have an article here that was written about it. I can't actually access the study itself, guys, I'm afraid, without paying for a subscription, which I'd rather not do. So I've done a bit of reading around it, various articles and scientific kind of news websites and so on have reported on the results of this study, and it's, common knowledge what the results are at this point. So I'm actually reading an article here from Medical News Today, and the title of the article, which I'll put in the description, is Out-of-Body Experiences, Neuroscience or the Paranormal. And this article was written on July 19th, 2017. So I just want to go to the part of the article which discusses this particular study and read to you for a moment. And it says the following. A study from 2014 titled Awareness During Resuscitation, AWARE, was the first serious large-scale investigation to look at near-death experiences. The study addressed the possibility of veridical perception during out-of-body experiences. Veridical perception is that feeling that people claim to have of being outside of their body or being above their body looking down. So just to be clear, whenever I refer to veridical perception, that's what we're talking about. The phenomenon of feeling like you've left your body. Just like the guy in the video referred to, where the consciousness separates from the body. But again, remember, feeling like your consciousness is separated from your body does not mean that your consciousness did, in fact, separate from your body. But alas, I digress. Let's continue with the article. The research involved multiple hospitals and hundreds of interviews with cardiac arrest survivors to investigate whether any individuals had genuinely floated above themselves and viewed their surroundings. Researchers placed pictures on shelves that would only be viewable from above. In this way, they could test whether people experiencing out-of-body experiences really could leave their bodies. Although there were only 2 veridical out-of-body experiences during the study, neither could accurately relate the images from the shelves. We eagerly await the next phase known as Aware 2, as the authors write. Another veridical recall is a real possibility in the 1,000 plus monitored cases, and who knows, that ever-elusive visual recall may yet be found. Summary: when this was put to the test, and when we put images in a high place in the room where people are having near-death experiences or suffering from cardiac arrest and being declared clinically dead, or their heart stops in an operating room, not one of the people in this study, whether it was hundreds or thousands or whatever the case may be, I believe they looked at thousands of cases, but only 140 survivors were actually interviewed because many of the others died. But out of those hundreds of people that were interviewed, not one of them could accurately relay the image that was at the top. So if you were floating above your body, you in theory should have been able to see the image that was at that height in the room, but nobody could honestly and accurately relay it. That's a problem, right? The other problem here is that out of the hundreds that were studied and observed, only a very small number actually had this supposed experience. You wouldn't get that sense from the video that we're critiquing, would you? The way they present the information almost makes it sound like this is a triviality. It happens every time somebody has a near-death experience. They step outside their body and the consciousness separates, and this is a universal human experience. That's not the case at all. So this is actually a minority phenomenon, or at least the only research we have in it suggests that it is in fact a minority phenomenon. But look, fair enough. It could be a minority phenomenon and still be true. Maybe only a minority of people are able to separate their consciousness from their body, right? You could make that claim. It wouldn't make it true. But even those people who did separate from their body, they couldn't describe the picture that was up high in the room. So I'm inclined to doubt it, guys. But as the study says, maybe it will be discovered in the future. And you know what, guys? As soon as veridical perception is verified in a scientific environment with double-blind trials and actual testing with photographs high up in the room, as soon as that's verified, I will begin to take reincarnation seriously, or at least I will begin to take the separation of the consciousness from the body seriously. But let's just steel-man that for a moment before we move on. Let's imagine in this study there were in fact a small sample size of people who, after claiming that their consciousness separated from their body, were able to describe the picture in detail. Would that prove reincarnation was true? Would that prove that the consciousness can separate from the body? Not necessarily, guys. Again, if you apply honest skepticism to that, if indeed that did happen, all we would have there is an observation. All of the research would still lie ahead. You'd now need to repeat that experiment, and you'd now need to do all the work towards explaining how the person knew what the information was. Because there are, and again, you might not like to hear this, but there are other candidate explanations. There could be disingenuous research at play. Maybe somebody whispered in the ear of the person what the image was. Maybe they saw the image when they weren't supposed to. Right? There are possibilities here that could, in fact, explain how somebody was able to describe the image. There's also the specter, dare I say, of coincidence. Coincidences happen, guys. If we were to observe 1,000 people, let's imagine all 1,000 had a veridical perception experience, or an experience of being outside of their body. Let's imagine 10 out of the 1,000 experienced that out-of-body experience and were able to describe the picture loosely, or maybe even perhaps in detail. Would that confirm it? Or could that just be coincidence? You know, if I ask you to think of a number right now, dear listener, 1 out of 100, just think of any number. I'm going to go with 37. Now, if enough of people watch this video, some of you will undoubtedly have thought of 37. And if you did, this will have been a truly strange experience for you. However, is that evidence for me being able to peer into your mind and tell you what the number is? Or could it just be coincidence? And again, guys, that's what I'm suggesting here. This research that was done indicates to me that these experiences are rare. It indicates to me that these experiences are not as people relay them. Not to say that they're being disingenuous. People obviously do have the feeling of leaving their bodies sometimes, but that's not what's actually happening, because if it was what was happening, they would be able to say what the image was that was high up in the room. Right? So there's a huge problem there. You can't possibly come to the conclusion that this has been verified or that this is an established phenomenon. But in the event that they could describe the details of the image above, we still wouldn't be able to rule out coincidence. It could be just like the number. If you do this with enough people, if we were to investigate 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000 cardiac arrest cases where people have out-of-body experiences, mere coincidence, mere statistical possibility would suggest that at least some sample of the people would guess correctly what the image was at the top of the room in that high up place. We still wouldn't have gotten any closer to verifying that people can actually leave their bodies. That would still have to be proven with more robust findings, right? So anyway, I'm going to move on for now. I think I've addressed that point. If you feel that there's anything else I need to add there, or if you think that I've addressed it quite well, whatever your thoughts, again, you can jump into the comments below and tell me what you think. And obviously, I would welcome any constructive criticism. But before we get there, let's move on with the video.
Consciousness separates from the body and goes over the body. From that vantage point, they can see ongoing earthly events, which may include their own frantic resuscitation efforts.
I think this is a very important admission in the video. Please notice that one of the events that this speaker relays as potential evidence for out-of-body experiences is a person who claims to have witnessed their own frantic resuscitation event. But isn't that a fairly trivial thing to guess? Right? If somebody comes out of a cardiac arrest resuscitation and says, "Oh my God, I was outside my body, I saw you guys resuscitating me," that's like guessing that it's going to snow in Alaska, right? That's like guessing it's going to rain in Ireland. Does a bear shit in the woods? Right? This is trivial. You know what this reminds me of? And I won't name this person, but a very close friend of mine went to a medium. This friend of mine, their father passed away, and before their father passed away, tragically, they wrote a letter. And when this friend went to the medium, according to my friend, or so my friend alleged, was able to tell them the contents of the letter in detail. And they, my friend, thought that this was powerful evidence for the truth of mediumship and the ability to contact the dead and so forth. I then proceeded to guess the contents of the letter as well, and they were shocked and couldn't believe it. Now, I did ask this person if they really wanted my opinion before I took down this obviously comforting belief that they had, and they did give me permission to proceed with my critique, and I think I shook their faith. Because the truth is, it's not terribly difficult to guess what somebody might say in their final letter to a loved one. Right? I mean, they're not going to talk about the national lottery numbers, are they? They're not going to be talking about what they watched on TV last night. No. They're going to say, forgive me for saying so, they might be stereotypes, but they're still meaningful. But they're going to say the tried and true things like, "I'm proud of you. Just remember that even though I'm gone, I love you. And I think that you're going to go on and live a wonderful life. I think you're going to achieve great things. And I'm so sorry that I'm not going to be there to hold your hand every step of the way." It's not terribly difficult to guess what a father might have said in their final letter to their child before passing away. Again, these guesses that a medium using cold reading and various techniques can engage in are not, bombshells. It's not like they've guessed the lotto numbers. They've guessed things that fall within a very specific category where the guesswork is not terribly difficult. Is this not exactly the same when it comes to near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences? Are you telling me, the speaker in this video, are you honestly telling me that if a person wakes up from a resuscitation attempt and says, "I saw you operating on me," that you're going to take that as, "Oh my God, they knew what we were doing in the room. How could they have known that?" I mean, that's a trivial guess. They might also say, and I saw that there were doctors and nurses in the room. Oh my God. What an unbelievable guess. What a shot in the dark. There's no way they could have known that. They might also say, I could see myself being wheeled into the surgery room, and I saw people with rubber gloves and masks and surgical equipment. Oh my God! Oh my God, it's true! Just spare me. I think this guy reveals his biases when he says that out loud. Unintentionally, I think the admission there is quite significant in the direction of disbelieving what he's claiming, right? Quite a significant admission of bias there, in my view. But let's continue.
After that, they may go into or through a tunnel. Often at the end of the tunnel is a beautiful, mystical, unearthly light. And then once they pass into that area of light, they may be in unearthly landscapes. Often they're described as being beautiful without any comparison on Earth. There may be colors there that are so beautiful that they don't even exist on Earth. They may hear music so lovely that it is beyond anything possible on Earth. In these unearthly realms, they may have what's called a life review, where they see part of their prior life. They may see their deceased loved ones. They may have joyous reunions that people they knew on Earth who died. And then ultimately, at the end of their experience, they often have to make a decision about returning to their earthly life or not.
Claim, 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 claim. I don't care. I don't care what they saw. I honestly don't. Forgive me if that sounds dismissive, but these are all just claims. I saw a bright light, I had to make a decision, I had a life review, yada, 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 yada. Sure, it's fantastic. And I'm God, by the way. I can do miracles. And I can see into your mind, and I know that you're lying to me. Yeah. We can all make claims. Talk is cheap. As Christopher Hitchens once put it, that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed as such. I don't honestly care what these people are relaying in their visions and their so-called near-death experiences, because none of it means that it actually happened. They might be telling the truth. In fact, I would attribute the principle of charity and assume that the majority of them are. But again, it doesn't matter. I just go back to my mother example. My mother would be telling me the truth if she told me that she had breakfast with Jesus Christ. That wouldn't mean that she did. I'm going to move on.
Could the mind which splits apart from the physical brain be, in essence, the soul, which continues to exist after final bodily death, according to some religious doctrines?
No, I don't think it's the soul. I think possibility has to be demonstrated. You can't just say, is it possible that it's the soul, and be taken seriously. I think that's just bull. It's just nonsense. It's also possible that we're in the Matrix. It's also possible that the entire universe was created this second with all of our memories intact. Although I don't necessarily think that those are possibilities, right? But I can say that and sound sophisticated, but no, I don't actually believe those things. I don't think the universe was created a second ago with all of my memories intact. And no, I don't think that these near-death experiences are explainable with reference to a soul for which you have provided little to no evidence. If you're interested in my thoughts on the soul, I did a full podcast on that, which you can check out. I'll put the link in the description below. I'm not going to waste my time going over all of that again. Suffice to say, there's not a shred of decent evidence for the existence of a soul, and so I'm going to move on.
Let's now discuss the fourth scientific evidence for reincarnation, the phenomenon of consciousness. Many scientists today assume that consciousness is produced by the brain, but this assumption has neither been demonstrated experimentally nor explained theoretically to any reasonable degree of satisfaction.
This might actually be the first point of agreement in the video. The hard problem of consciousness is so called because it's a hard problem to solve. We don't know how consciousness emerges. Now, that's fine, and it's true to say that there's not really a strong theory of consciousness. Again, totally fine. But to say that it has nothing to do with the brain, I think is rather obscene. I think there's good evidence to suggest that consciousness has something to do with the brain. And if you don't believe that, we know from brain injury studies and so forth that there are parts of the brain that reliably correlate with our consciousness and our experience and our personality. If the visual cortex is damaged, we can't see anymore. If part of the brain that has been correlated heavily with emotion gets damaged, our emotions change and so on. So the brain definitely has something to do with consciousness. Whether or not there's something spooky or supernatural going on has never been demonstrated. All scientists would say, I think if they were being brutally honest, all neuroscientists would say if they were being brutally honest, is that brain states heavily correlate with consciousness. Maybe the consciousness is something that lives beyond the body, maybe it's something rather spooky and supernatural, but all those maybes are things that would have to be demonstrated. But appealing to the fact that consciousness hasn't been fully explained by science, or has only been partially explained, or is in a purely correlative status in terms of our explanatory kind of framework, appealing to that in this video is not going to get you very, very far. But let's see where they take this, because again, we are in agreement that the hard problem of consciousness hasn't been solved. We don't know how consciousness is produced. We don't even know how to define it accurately. All we know is that our consciousness appears to be related to the brain in some shape or form. Looking at the evidence that I've already relayed, I think that's a totally fair point to make at this juncture. Let's see where they go with it. I think you can imagine what they're going to do here.
But now there's an increasing number of scientists in various fields who dare openly to challenge this old paradigm, and we're moving toward what some have started to call a post-materialist paradigm. And now meetings are being organized and books are being prepared with regard to this post-materialist paradigm. So I can predict that it's only a matter of decades before we have a new scientific revolution, and this time it will be about mind, consciousness, and spirit. And it will be probably the most important conceptual revolution that we've ever had in the history of humankind.
Let me know when that important revolution happens, because it hasn't happened yet. Let me know when those meetings and books are written and when they contain solid evidence for near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. One point of order, he refers to the view of consciousness that has been presented by science, that is, that it roughly correlates with the brain, as materialism. That's not technically true. Materialism is the philosophical position that all that exists is physical matter. All that exists is the material world. Science does not operate on the assumption that all that exists is the material world. That's not what goes on. Scientists, or science more generally, doesn't claim to know that all that exists is the material world. Science operates on what you might call methodological materialism, or otherwise known as methodological naturalism. This is the view that while we can't investigate the immaterial or the metaphysical, we're not making claims about it, we're just focusing on the material world. So again, methodological naturalism or methodological materialism doesn't claim that the material or natural world is all that exists. It simply acknowledges that all we can investigate is the natural and material world. And that is what the scientific method does. So, when he says that we're going to move to a post-materialist world, he seems to be implying there that hard-nosed scientists are claiming that there definitely isn't anything metaphysical and that there definitely isn't anything supernatural. But that's not how science works. It doesn't go around making claims about in terms of absolute certainty about the metaphysical and the supernatural. That's not what it does. Science takes hypotheses and tests them and falsifies them to see if they graduate to become theories or facts. And when you test and falsify the evidence for near-death experiences, like the study I referred to earlier, you discover that it's wanting, that there isn't any good hard evidence for the existence of near-death experiences, or rather the existence of a consciousness that can leave the body and so forth. So again, this is another rather disingenuous and inappropriate framing of what's going on here. Scientists are not asserting with any certainty. Science doesn't deal in certainties. Nothing in science is 100%. It would be unscientific to say that something is 100%. Science simply deals with the natural and materialistic world because that is all science can do. It measures things, weighs things, quantifies things. All of these claims about consciousness, all of these claims about near-death experiences and leaving the body are metaphysical and supernatural claims that when we put them to the test, again, they come up wanting. Why can't those people who float above their body describe the pictures at that high point in the room? I'll tell you why. Because I think that their feeling that they're out of their body is just that, a feeling. So again, all I'll say to this speaker is, let me know when the revolution happens and let me know when you have solid evidence for the claims that you're making. Until then, you're just going to have to accept that skeptical people such as myself are going to view your claims as they rightfully should. Bullshit.
Thus, scientific studies in these 4 fields offer strong evidence for the existence of a soul different from the body.
And no, none of this evidence was strong. None of this evidence was even moderate. None of this evidence could even be called weak. I would say that the evidence presented in this video could even be loosely referred to as evidence. I think that this video is a compilation of assertions, claims, fallacies, and nonsense. And if you disagree with me, dear listener, and I missed something, like I've said in the video already, jump into the comments below. I always welcome constructive criticism and disagreement. If I missed something, if you think I could have done better in a particular area, and if you have some compelling evidence for reincarnation or the idea that consciousness can leave the body and that we can actually live other lives, if you have evidence for that, that you feel that I've glossed over or missed out on, make me aware. Alternatively, if you do agree with me, jump into the comments below and tell me why. Did this video change your mind? Did it support an already existing view that you held? Whatever the case may be, I would love to hear from you. My favorite thing about this channel is having the conversation after each upload with you guys in the comments below, and I really, really look forward to that, especially on this video, which is more of a different outing for the A Magician's Thoughts podcast, where I wanted to focus on the claims of a different religious tradition, that being the Buddhist and Hindu tradition. So, if you liked the video, drop a like in it, and if this is your first time to the channel, if you got this far, well done, it's great to have you. Just hit that subscribe button and you'll get more content like this every single week. And if you are hitting that subscribe button, don't forget to check the bell notification icon. That way you'll be able to stay up to date with all things on the channel, and you'll even be notified as and when my latest videos go live. So guys, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in this life or the next. Bye bye.